8-man football player, and let alone I find two in the same class now with two guys coming in the same class, kind of amazing. I signed a 9-man football, Chad Greenway, when I was at the University of Iowa, that very similar to Tanner, played a variety of different positions, and I think he later became the 14th or 15th pick to the Vikings, so I know this can turn out in a positive way. That concludes our signing class for this year. One of the unique things that we're in right now, 16 players signed, 10 of them reported in January, right? So really just a very unique opportunity for us to get guys in here working with them. Today was the first day we had a chance to get with them on the grass, so we actually had our first chance as coaches because we were out on the road in January the whole time to be around these guys for the first time. It really was a fun day overall for that. A couple things off the field. Haven't really been able to say, one of the things in January was pretty awesome is to watch some of our guys that have been here in the past have some tremendous success on the football field. See Spoon get a Pro Bowl invite and all that goes into that. I did talk to Sid the night, unfortunately, he had an injury, so to be able to talk to him a couple hours after that happened and realize the highs and lows of what football can bring was very unique. A couple shout outs, I have a couple former players. Obviously Nick Allegretti from here going to the Super Bowl, but Dre Greenlaw, it was kind of one of the few games I've been able to watch in its entirety. It was a playoff game 2 weeks ago. Dre was a kid very similar to Tanner, had 0 offers other than us at the University of Arkansas, I believe. We offered about midway through his senior year. Came in as a safety, we moved him to linebacker, and now he's playing the Super Bowl. Just a really cool story. Brandon Allen, another former player of mine, he's the 3rd quarterback at San Fran, so kind of a neat thing to watch all those guys get where they need to be, and then also the five or six guys that played in bowl games. I think we have 6 guys now invited to the combine. Just kind of check in with those guys periodically to get calls from GMs and personnel people that are at these senior bowls that are watching or interviewing our guys. I specifically got an interview while a GM was interviewing, or his organization was interviewing Tip Ryman. They literally reached out to me and said, is this as real as I feel it is? And I was like, it's even probably better than you think, right? So I think our guys portrayed themselves in a way that makes them very valuable to that next level. So obviously a couple staffing changes. Really kind of in January we stayed really just focused on recruiting. There was a new recruiting rule that allowed us as coaches to go out and be on the road and see kids into schools that we've never been able to do before. I'd never been able to sit down with a junior. The very first day the rule was in effect for us in January. It just happened that all the schools were canceled in Illinois, and I had a 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 4 o'clock all in a row at 6 different schools in Chicago, and I could sit down with the young man and their parents in the school. It was a timing factor that there was no school, so it was kind of convenient. They didn't have conflict with classes, but literally got a commitment that day, and when I was in that school, when it was beginning to happen, I was sitting there with a young man and his parents, and the dad said, "Hey, can you step out a minute? Goes, B, I want to have a conversation with my family." And I'm like, "Oh boy, I've been through this before, but I've never been through it in January with a junior, right? Because it's been illegal to have a conversation with them in the school until their senior year." So it's been a learning experience for everybody. I think that last week I was on the road. I was in 10 different states in 5 days, so it was just a little bit chaotic. So we really have focused on staffing after we've got back in. I've had several candidates on campus, had a couple on today, have a couple more in this weekend. My intent and goal is to have somebody up and running at the positions by Monday. I think we're on task. I expect to probably have a wide receiver coach here sooner than later as we speak. And then inside linebacker position, I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern. I've had a couple on candidate, but there's one guy that I want to talk to that isn't available until the later part of this week. So we'll handle that and process that as it comes. With that, I'll open it up. Anything else? Other questions?
Bret, why did you want to make a couple defensive staff changes? What do you hope to add?
Why?
Yeah.
I haven't talked to you guys since then?
No.
Well, twofold, right? One of the things that I think really, as we sat back and looked at that season, you get done, you go back and take a comprehensive look at what you did schematically, what you did as results, but also just have a lot of dialogue with players, coaches, and staff. And I realized where we are and where I wanted us to go. Obviously no negative, both the guys that I relieved one was a former player, one was a former coach. Think the world of them and their family, who they are, and what they're going to be, but just felt we needed to have some change on that side of the ball, especially, and just continuity and a little bit of everything: football, recruiting, administrative things in the building. Just really felt that was necessary. I haven't made a lot of moves like that in my coaching career. I think that's 7 guys over 16 years, right? So, yeah, that's what it was. Felt we could get an opportunity to get better, get stronger, and hopefully that's what's going to happen.
What is the challenge of a coach when you have turnover with the staff, especially the last 2 years?
Well, I think you know, first and foremost, it's a new person in a young kid's life, right? But literally since the first day when I came here, I talked to the players about, hey, like if you hire good people and you have the things that I think can happen, like you're going to have transition. I've been fortunate enough to have, I think about 7 head coaches now that have left, several coordinators, guys going to the NFL. I got a call last week, 2 weeks ago, a running back coach that I used to have was hired into the NFL again, and that was, I believe he was my second or third running back coach that went to the NFL 4 in a row. So I think we brace the kids for it, but also understand like one of the things that is advantageous for them if they have a chance and a dream to go on to the next level, you literally have a league that changes coaches on a weekly on a yearly basis, and the ability to learn and be instructed by coaches from multiple backgrounds is a good thing. But anytime you bring somebody new in the building, there's going to be obviously a change in the way they say things, do things, preach things, and that'll take a little bit of adjustment, but I don't think it's something you can't overcome.
Coach, now that you got Washington, Oregon, 2 LA schools, does it change the way a little bit of your recruiting map?
I get the question, and it obviously changes in some capacity, but I really believe this, right? For us at Illinois, we're going to be based on what Illinois is, right? Okay. So we're going to focus in the state of Illinois. Everybody has a piece of Illinois. Really concentrate on some border states. I realize that some border states don't have a lot of prospects, and they also have strong home state programs. So but we do recruit any border state to Illinois. We've really done a lot in New Jersey, and we've done a lot in Florida. I would say that's a blueprint of what we are. I don't see that changing, but we've dabbled into California now. I think based on the outcomes of my hires here over the next week or 2 weeks, that could really open the doors. I've always been intrigued with Dallas because there's a direct flight here from Dallas to Illinois. And I think that is a venue that we could explore more than ever now that especially when we got kids going west or families going west to games. So yeah, it's going to change the dynamic at some point, but I don't think it changed a lot about what Illinois is.
When we talked to you just at press conference right after the season, it didn't sound like you were making any coaching changes. Like, did you have a sense after you did?
I just didn't broadcast it to you guys. I don't think that would be a very...
Right, I just didn't know if it was something that more of an evaluation period after that you got the sense.
I think I probably knew at some point, and the people involved I had those conversations with, right? But I really wanted to take a moment and just process where I was at, where I thought we needed to go, and that's when I made the moves.
When you evaluated you for Aaron, and then what can he bring to your defense?
What can David Gibbs?
Yeah, for Aaron and then your defense as a whole.
Yeah, so Gibby and I don't know the whole story. I literally met him my first week on the job as a linebacker coach at the University of Iowa. Myself and Bobby Elliott, God rest his soul, was no longer with us. We went on we took the defensive staff and we went to Kansas and Kansas State. At Kansas, went there, and Glenn Mason was there. There was a guy by the name of Mike Hankwitz, was the defense coordinator, and he had a young DB coach by the name of David Gibbs. Then we went on from there and went to Kansas State, and I had a conversation with those guys, which was the first time I ever met Venables, and like it's just crazy the people you meet back at that time and what they become now. So Gibby and I hit it off then, and then he, lo and behold, obviously comes into the state of Minnesota. I don't think he was the coordinator first when he got there. I think Hank had it, then Hank left, and then Gibby became the D coordinator. I recruited Minneapolis and South Florida, which is where Gibby recruited, so we really began to talk a lot of football, be around each other. When I was at the University of Iowa, when Hayden left, Glenn Mason offered me a job at the University of Minnesota under Gibby was D coordinator. He and I were real close. I almost took that job, but I stayed at Iowa until they named who they were going to name. That's when he named Kirk. Kirk kept me, so I never made that transition. But just kind of, he and I have been around each other for a long time, never worked together, but I've followed his work. Obviously, he became the D coordinator at several different places, both Minnesota when they had a great defense, at Auburn, went in the league for whatever it was, 7, 8, 9 years. He and I had conversations about that. I had an opportunity early in my career to get a couple interviews in the NFL and really didn't pursue them hard because I just kind of listened to what he told me about that league. And so there's just a lot of things that tied into our relationship. when I first came here, actually Ryan and Gibby were together in Missouri, and the year before I had interviewed for the head coaching job at Colorado, and one of the coaches that interviewed there was Ryan Walters, and I was talking to Gibby. I'm like, tell me about this guy, and because I was in direct competition with him, right, and obviously didn't go that direction, so that's when I first heard about Ryan. And when I took the job here, when I made kind of a decision, I had about 5 candidates. I interviewed 3 guys. I interviewed obviously Ryan, an active head coach, and a guy now that's actually a coordinator in this league. And major reason why I went with Ryan was the conversations with Gibby, just that he was around him in certain ways that allowed him to grow. They'd been together, been around each other. So when transition happened a year ago and I decided to retain Ryan, or decided to promote Aaron, I really had interviewed Antonio earlier in my career here. Like, I followed him all the way through. I thought it'd be a nice combo. Those two knew each other, but obviously when I made transition, I wanted to get an older voice in that room. I wanted to get someone with a little bit different perspective, and that's what really Gibby was the only guy that I went after. I contacted him early on, literally in December, kind of get a feel where he was at. He had some things moving in his yard, and then when I made transition, I just reached out to him and said, this is what I plan on doing, this is where I'm at. And Aaron and I flew down and met with him on several different occasions during the recruiting periods, and had a chance for those guys to visit. David had known quite a few guys on our staff, and I just thought the comfort level there after several meetings was pretty significant, and that's why we pulled the trigger.
Right, you guys signed in December. You signed Josiah Knight, and
Yeah.
today Mississippi State. And
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what happened there?
Yeah, Josiah was a guy that came to us in June, committed to us. I know I went down there during the December signing period, or December recruiting period. Really was excited to get him in the boat. He signed with us. I always say this, right? Every day I grab a cup of coffee, walk out the door, and when I'm driving into work every day, I say, what's going to happen today that I have no idea is going to happen? And it happened with Josiah in 16 years. I've never had this kind of moment come up. But when it became clear to me that he was not going to be able to come here to Illinois, that's when I reached out to him. We went and saw him. I sent a couple of coaches to him and his family and his coaches. His coach was ironically a former Illinois player. Talked to coach as well, and I said, hey, if I can't get him here to Illinois, I loved him and his family for everything they are. Like, what can we do to help? And because he wanted to be here, there no doubt about what he wanted to do. But that wasn't going to be possible, so I literally told him that the best option I think he could do is to sign, I believe, Mississippi State, or whatever the best feeling he was. But I know he's a tremendous football player. There's a reason we recruited him. There's a reason. I think he had over 60 offers, if I'm not mistaken. I never thought I would help an SEC team get a player, but I wanted to see what's best for him. And I know there was 2 Big Ten schools who were messing with him, so I was kind of glad he wasn't going to be in this league. He's at Mississippi State. Wish him the best luck.
Bret, when you evaluate your 2 8-man signees, and I'll even go back to like Mac Brasilic,
Yeah.
how does level of competition or level of instruction that they're getting at maybe a smaller school affect your
Yeah,
evaluation?
it's a great one. So really, you just learn through history, right? And when I was at the University of Iowa, I had a young linebacker. I literally wrote a letter to him every day of his life, right, for 2 years. His name was Aaron Campman, and he was a guy that came from a little town called Appleton, Parkersburg. That little community, the University of Iowa, had 3 NFL draft picks, and Brad Meester, who was ironically the only guy that Iowa didn't go after, went to UNI, and he became a first-round draft pick. I believe Aaron was a mid-round draft pick. Casey Weekman was maybe a second or third-round pick. I played with Casey. I knew how good a player he was, but then that was from the playing side. And then as a coach, I began to, I go in, and Aaron Campman was recruited nationally by everybody. He was our biggest competition. Ironically, there was a guy by the name of Kyle Vandenbosch, who was an Iowa kid that went to Nebraska. There was a guy named Trev Alberts, who was before him, who was ironically very close to our league now. So there were some small school kids that went to Nebraska and had great success. So I was bound and determined that I was going to get Aaron Campman to say yes, right? And thankfully we did, and I had a great time coaching him. There was another kid by the name of Dallas Clark, who's from a small town in Iowa, that Livermore, if I'm not mistaken, Iowa, and he was totally under-recruited. I actually got him as a walk-on. Couldn't get him to play linebacker, but I told Kirk, I'm like, this guy can't read a guard pull, but he's really good at running. Later became the best tight end in college, in the country, first-round draft pick. I think the great thing about small schools is you're usually three things. You're undersized, under-recruited, and underdeveloped. And those are three things that I think you can change literally if you're in the right program. And, Matt Bailey was kind of our first rodeo where we really liked Matt. He came in the spring, was in the middle of a track season, didn't run a great time, but I loved everything about him. He was so disappointed, and I called Matt after that night in the spring and just was compassionate to him. He was waiting on an offer. He was hoping on an offer, and we couldn't do it. Lo and behold, 5-6 months later, we were able to make that call and offer him, and been rewarded for it ever since then, right? Mac Resetich, I watched Mac. I remember when Pat Hamilton came in and gave me the film, and I watched like 25, 30 plays, and every one was a touchdown. And I'm like, how many touchdowns does this guy have, right? And he told me the number, and then I sent a couple coaches to watch him play basketball. Again, in this conference, I realized that a lot of people watch what we do. When we make moves, we had a young man a couple years ago, a linebacker that had 0 offers. We offered him, and 2 weeks later he had over 40 offers, and he went to a blue and gold school. And so, like, I just know enough not to put people on the path of too much of what we believe in. So when Matt came around, that was a story, and the same thing with Tanner now.
Coach, all things considered, considering the season you had last year, staff changes, guys going to the draft, does spring ball take on more importance this year than usual, integrating coaches and all that stuff?
0. I think that we go into spring practice with the highest intensity humanly possible. I don't think anybody that comes into our building would tell you there's anything, even the candidates that come through, the energy level in this building and the desire to be successful. I get the question, you got to ask it. It makes sense to you, but it makes no sense to me, right? Like, we approach every season, every spring, every workout. I literally had a conversation with our guys today that, today's workout is the first Wednesday workout in week 3 week 4 of winter conditioning. And if you just think it's another day, then you're going to be left behind. Tomorrow's got to be better than it was today. Next Wednesday has to be 5 times better than it was this past Wednesday. It's just, we will not survive with that mentality or that thought.
Brett, I think all
I'll
of
talk
us.
to one more after this.
I think all of us suspected Jim Leonard to get a job.
Yeah.
somewhere. Is he still on your staff?
Yeah,
And
I just talked
his
to him today.
future? What's his future?
So in theory he is, but we signed him with the idea that if he wants to do this, then it would be open to come back to him. He and I have had a million conversations, not about the job, but just like Jimmy's a guy that I just like bouncing things off of and where it's at. I don't want to get into his business, but I think this: if he doesn't have the things he wants at a different level, or different than our level, what I would say, if you're not in college, right? I think we would be back at it. He literally sent a report a couple weeks ago that was unbelievably detailed and great ideas and thoughts. I just reached out to him last night. I know he's got some irons in the fire. That's his business, but yeah, Jimmy's been awesome, a very gifted coach in a lot of ways.
What are your thoughts on
Finish up with this.
the current status of signing day? 10 years ago, first Wednesday in February was
Yeah.
everything. Now it's 5% of recruiting kind of thing,
Yeah.
Do you want to see a change? Do you want to see a shift in that?
I want to do what's best for the game, right? And I really do believe the way this thing has evolved, right? So it used to be, this was the National Signing Day, right? And I was at the National Coaches Convention meeting in Nashville in early January, and there's a meeting they have that has all the head coaches at it. Myself and Ryan Day were the only 2 coaches there from the Big Ten, but it had a lot of coaches talking, right? And I made the assumption that everybody's signing day was like ours. It was kind of an anticlimactic. We recruit a certain type of kid. There probably aren't a lot of surprises. Obviously, you already asked about Josiah, so those things are going to pop up. But for the most part, I pretty much went to bed that night knowing who was going to sign tomorrow, unless we were going to get clubbed over the head with a billy club. It was going to be what it was, right? But I think there's a lot of places that you're dealing with decisions that young men are making that have tremendous impact on them and their families, right? Like, you could probably understand what I'm saying, right? And when you get into that world, there's some things that just, I remember Coach Fry telling me a story when he was at, I think at SMU. They used to let coaches go out on the road and you could be present while a kid was signing, right? And he talked about how, I think it was at SMU, they decided that to keep everybody from trying to steal their guys, they put them all in airplanes. And they flew them around from 8 o'clock. We would touch down in a hangar, fuel up, and take off and fly them around. Like, can you imagine that, right? Like, now Coach Fry could be at the time, right? God rest him, I love him. But he said that's what happened. They literally flew in and landed in a hangar, at 12:01 and they would all sign their scholarship papers, right? I don't think we want to go back to that, but I do think there is an element of recruiting that, like, once you say it, it should just be, you know what I mean? Like, maybe there's a grace period or whatever it is, but there's a lot of people that think, all right, like, if you're a sophomore or a junior and we offer you a scholarship, we can hand you papers, and if you want to sign it, it's done, right? I remember Mike used to say that, Mike Leach. I used to, be in some meetings with him. I distinctly remember Coach Spurrier talking about it, right? And I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, but there has been some coaches that propose like a June, July signing day, which to me would make a lot of sense. But I also understand high school coaches are very much against it because they think kids will opt out of their senior years, right? So one of the first problems that creeped into college football that everybody wants to write about was guys opting out, right? Like, I remember Illinois, when we went to a bowl game a year ago, you never had players opt out. Well, it'd been in college football for about 10 years, but Illinois had never been to a bowl game, so it wasn't a reality here, right? But like, that part, I think, is real. I do believe if kids sign before their senior year, they probably could have a percentage of guys. I'm not saying it's going to be half. I'm not saying it's 25, but there might be 10, 20% of the most elite players in college, high school football. They got their NIL deals, they got their scholarship in hand, they're just going to say peace out, right? And so I don't know what the happy medium is. The part I like about the June, July is that now most kids make their decisions, and I think it would take a lot of pressure off them. I don't know how many coaches. I know I would say if a kid called me and said he signed with us and he's not going to play a senior year, I said, that's ridiculous. Go play, right? You get better at football by playing football. We have a young man, Tyshawn, that just literally came to us, right? And he tore his ACL this past year, right? In week 4 or 5, right? And I remember them calling us, obviously coaches, an alumnus as well, and they're worried I was going to pull the plug. And I'm like, you kidding me? Like, let us help you. Can we have the surgery here? We appealed to the NCAA and tried to get him to have the surgery here. Like, we don't push him away, we pull him in. But I'm not sure everybody would operate like that. Like, if I was, like, there's some programs like, wait a minute, he's injured, he's got an ACL, let's go see who else I can get. So I think that's just part of the game. But Robert, I wish I had a better answer. I do think an early signing period would help everybody. But if you could create some type of caveat that the kid's gotta, I don't think you can make a kid play, but like, that's the only element I don't see. And then the flip side of it would be if you sign a kid and there's a coaching change, right? Like we literally just had a coach leave college football to be a DC in the NFL, right? Like that's it. I know half just somewhat bit, but like, he wanted to do that, it's his business. But like, that opens that portal for those guys for 30 days, right? It's just a very interesting time. Like, I with my coaches, I've said it since I've got here, but it's so true. There has never been a time where recruiting your roster is more important than it is right now, right? So even though I'm the outside linebacker coach, or I'm the O-line coach, or I'm the tight ends coach, I want you to have a relationship with that kid on the other side of the ball, right? Because he may come to you in a moment of, hey, what do you think I should do, right? Maybe he's having an argument with his, or he's in a disagreement with his position coach, but somebody else can encourage him, right? Like, I'd be straight up real, right? Like, we had a number of transfers come in, and those transfers out there today working out are they're focused. Now for us, we're not in the Cadillac business, but like those guys are working. They're detailed. They're hungry. A lot of them came from smaller schools coming up, or were from a high level school that wasn't where they wanted to be. And every one of those guys talk about, since they've come into our building, how much they see we can help them, right? Like, and that's what makes me happy, because I know what we can do for those guys, and we're just extremely hungry. I was a little not down, but just the January can get tiresome, right? But to watch our guys work out, my wife, I was laying down Sunday night, and she's like, "Aren't you glad I don't have to get on a plane this week?" I'm like, so excited. She's like, "What time are you getting up?" I said 4:15. She's like, "Oh my God," right? Like, but that's what you needed. You need to come in and watch those guys work out, because that just bring your juices up, man. It's a really fun time in this sport. I think NIL is awesome. I think the early signing period is awesome. I think transfer opportunities for guys within reason. There's some things that bother you, right? Like, a kid right now can be a grad transfer and leave at any time. So in June and July, if he's graduated and you bring in a freshman that might be in front of him, and or something where somebody, 2 weeks, they can literally go to your spring game. They could literally, some schools, he could go to your fall camp first meeting and transfer to a next school, your opening opponent the next day. like that's legal. Like that's insanity. So there's some things that's got to get reeled in.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Justin.